From the Central America caravan to DACA, we have an in-depth discussion on the latest developments in the immigration front with immigration attorney Jorge Coombs. It's all here on the next Latino Motion. Join us.
Choose to get lost in the woods to gain experience in forest management.
Choose to travel through time to understand the past.
Choose to soar to pursue a career in dance.
Stockton University offers 50 high-quality academic programs, small class sizes, and affordable tuition. Choose to match your interests and talents at one of New Jersey's nationally ranked universities.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation, and Stockton University. This edition of Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is brought to you by the HD Studios at the campus of Stockton University. Funding for Latino Motion is provided by Atlanticare, a member of Geisinger, Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world, and South Jersey Gas. Welcome to Latino Motion, a weekly interview show highlighting issues impacting New Jersey's Latino community while advancing understanding of Latino cultural heritage and contributions to our society. And here is your host, Bert Lopez.
Buenos dias and welcome to Latino Motion. In today's political climate, immigration has become a divisive issue and one with many twists and turns. I'm happy to have back on the show immigration attorney Jorge Coombs to discuss the latest developments in immigration. Jorge, welcome back to Latino Motion.
Hi, Bert. Nice to be back.
I know this. We're taping this show May 1st, which is May Day, and there's a lot going on in terms of protests and also in the news issues about the caravan. Tell me the latest. What's going on?
Well, as we've been seeing all over the press, I mean, we have this caravan coming in one large group at the port of entry in Southern California, San Isidro. We have individuals who've tried climbing the fence, but a lot of them just really waiting to be processed through the entry point, the legitimate entry point. And what they're doing is they're trying to apply for asylum. And a lot of people are wondering, why is it taking so long? And the issue is the asylum process, the initial intake portion of it, is lengthy. It could take, I've had clients sit in, per person, sit in there for 24 hours, sometimes 48 hours, before they get what's called a credible fear interview. And that credible fear interview runs down the different criteria as to why the person's asking for asylum, and kind of a first blush, a first look at whether they feel that the individual individually qualifies or not for asylum.
Just going back a little bit in terms of the magnitude of the folks that are part of this caravan, it's not unusual to have thousands of people coming seeking asylum each year, is it?
I mean, these waves have happened. What I think is unique about this one versus others is that this one, they're primarily from Honduras, and Honduras isn't experiencing any significant or new issue that's creating this hardship. It's been an ongoing, Honduras, you could argue, is a failed state. I mean, it's being run by narco traffickers. There's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of violence. Some of the more violent cities in the world are currently in Honduras. And people are escaping that general environment. But it's not like we had, for example, with the TPS applications from Haiti, with the earthquake, or people escaping war like in Syria and that sort of thing.
So that's a little unique, which means that the possibility is very slim. It's already slim in terms of, and I'll just give you one of the numbers from the research is that annually there's about 65,000 applicants for asylum, and only 8,700 are approved. So it's a small fraction.
Yeah.
Anyways,
1 out of 10, 1 out of maybe some 12% get approved. And the reason for that is the person needs to articulate this credible fear. And not only that, they have to show they're part of a particular social group that is being persecuted in their country of origin, and they need to prove not only that that persecution is real or have some proofs that it's happened, but that the government, the police, the military, local police are unable to stop it. So individuals who are victims of violence, for example, like, I may be the victim of violence in Atlantic City, let's say. It doesn't mean that I can ask for asylum in France.
You could see the desperation of many of these people trying to reach for hope, and they're looking to the border and being able to get at least a hearing. It's that hope. We're going to continue this discussion. We've got a lot more to talk. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion. Welcome back to Latino Motion. Joining me is immigration attorney Jorge Coombs. And Jorge, we were talking about the asylum process and the caravan that we see in the news currently. Not an unusual event in itself because it's ongoing in terms of those seekers for asylum. One of the protests or many of the protests that we're seeing this day, May Day, is for DACA, in support of DACA. Let's talk a little bit about that. Where does that stand?
Well, as you recall, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program that was instituted as an executive order under President Obama was essentially terminated in September of 2017 by Donald Trump. And what Donald Trump said at that point was, let's just leave it for Congress to decide. And as we all know, Congress has not acted. What's also interesting with DACA is that it has since spun off extension requests, and we did have an extension period, and a lot of my clients filed during the extension period, but then there was a sunset date for the extensions.
And these extensions are not new applications, they're
no,
basically
they were
renewals.
Renewals, essentially renewals. And then we had litigation in California, New York, District of Columbia, and we've seen judges in all those jurisdictions essentially issue injunctions on the federal government saying, look, you've got to keep this program going, you've got to accept renewals. And in some cases, judges have even said, we want you to accept new applications. Problem with that is the original rules did not give deadlines or cutoff dates for new applicants other than the ones that were there. And we've had about almost 800,000 people approved under the program. And a lot of those have been renewing, but there are individuals that are saying, well, what's next for me? And you have to say, I don't know what's next. Congress hasn't acted yet, and that's why you're seeing these protests. That's exactly why.
So someone is, deadline is coming up to renew, should they?
They should. They should go ahead and renew, regardless of what it says on the website, regardless of the time frame, the original time frames. Just do the renewal. If you've never applied before and you want to apply, I think it's a much bigger risk. I cannot guarantee that any of that will be accepted.
So no new applications, renewals, if renew if you don't lose it.
What is also interesting about this litigation is, for example, in the case out of New York, the judges allowed the government to appeal. This is those attorneys siding with Donald Trump's position. And they're appealing based on the fact that the litigants that brought the case, the plaintiffs, are alleging that some of the language used by what was then Mr. Donald Trump during his campaign for presidency, and comments made after becoming president, were charged language or racial slurs that show that there was a bias on his behalf against particular immigrant groups or Latinos, let's say in our instance. And they're using that as a basis to challenge the decision of that court.
And that's still ongoing.
That's still ongoing.
Jorge, thanks. We got a lot more ground that we need to cover. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation. Join us online at www.latinomotion.tv. Find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We encourage your comments and contributions for show topics.
Welcome back to Latino in Motion. Joining me is our resident immigration expert, Jorge Coombs. Jorge, we were talking about DACA, and some of that is still up in the air, obviously. There's also some other action that has taken place as far as TPS. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, TPS is a program, stands for Temporary Protected Status, and by its definition, it should be temporary. It allows individuals that are fleeing some sort of emergency, be it man-made or natural in their home countries, come here to the United States, seek refuge. It's really a refugee program, and allow them to work in the United States, purchase property if they want, live like anybody else, but during that temporary period. Once the conditions in the home country improve, the program can be ended. So obviously, depending on what country you're from, those periods of temporary stay here in the United States are different. For example, Haitians had the earthquake back, I believe, in 2010. Their TPS program ended recently. Back in November, and that's 60,000 people. They are not renewing that program at all. Now, in the Latino community, we had a lot of individuals back during the periods of the Hurricane Mitch and other tropical storms in Central America who came up from Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador, and many of them got TPS under those programs. And we know that the Nicaraguan program also has ended. But in particular, the Hondurans, we have almost 60,000 Hondurans that have TPS. You got to think they've been here for a lot longer than the Haitian population, to where you could make the argument, and they are making it, that this is not temporary anymore, that they have roots, deep roots in the United States. They've been here for since the early 2000s. This is now going on 15, 16, 17 years that they've been here. And they're looking for some sort of extension, and it's not coming from the Trump administration.
And it is sort of a humanitarian issue for many that have not only established a house, careers, have had kids that obviously consider themselves as U.S. citizens and are U.S. citizens.
Correct.
Which makes it all that much harder for them to pick up and start another life somewhere that they haven't been for 16 years.
Yeah, I mean, for some of these other nationalities that we've seen their TPS end, many times they're given 6 months to 16 months to pick up and leave. And in the case of Hondurans, again, those roots are very deep. You may not be able to sell a house or finish up your kids' schooling or stop your job within that time period. It's extremely short. Now, what are people looking for? They're looking for Congress to act.
And that's the bottom line.
Bottom line.
All right. We want to discuss some other issues on the immigration front. We're going to take another quick break. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion. Welcome back to Latino Motion. Again, I'm here with Jorge Coombs, immigration attorney. And Jorge, we want to make this shift to some of the immigration support or immigrant support that's taking place in New Jersey through legislation. Let's talk about some of those issues.
Well, our new governor is pushing for New Jersey state IDs and driver's licenses for individuals who are undocumented.
And we've had quite a number of advocacy groups that have come on this show to talk about it as well.
Yeah, including the Hispanic Bar Association of New Jersey, which I'm a member of. I know they're lobbying for that as well.
So tell me, where does that stand? I mean, does it have a chance of passing?
It does have a chance of passing, but it is at opposition with what we're seeing currently at motor vehicles offices, where individuals who either never had any sort of ID at all, or individuals who were part of TPS or DACA, where they did have state-issued ID or driver's licenses, and those programs are ending. Those individuals are currently being turned away. They're not allowing them to renew, even if they have 6 months left on their permission. And it's been frustrating. It's creating some real problems for people where they're still in status, but they're not able to have ID, many times not able to drive or get to work.
So right now, where does this stand in terms of the bill? So I understand there's a bill both in this Senate and the Assembly?
My understanding is it's still pending.
It's still pending. It's still in committee. It hasn't come out of committee yet.
That's my understanding.
The governor has said that he will sign it, and I know that this is going to rub against some federal issues. What do you think are the chances?
Well, one of the issues that we see is in 2005, Congress passed the Real ID Act, and that was as a reaction to the recommendations of the 9/11 Committee. And the 9/11 Committee wanted certain minimum federal criteria for ID in driver's licenses. And this is for, I'm not talking to drive in a state, I'm talking to get into, onto an airplane at an airport, get into certain federal facilities, certain power plants, et cetera. And most state ID at that time didn't meet the minimum criteria. At this point, we have maybe half the states who meet it, and New Jersey is one of the states that currently doesn't meet it and has asked for an extension. However, that extension period is terminating in October 2018. So I don't know if New Jersey will then move to a Real ID compliant ID/driver's license. But if they did that, and this is where the tension comes in, that ID would have to meet with certain requirements at the federal level that New Jersey's planned legislation would not be able to meet. In other words, you would need to show that you have lawful status in the United States. You see what I'm saying?
So,
we have a tension in place.
So it's going to be difficult, at least, to be able to get that into law here in New Jersey.
Well, what I think is going to happen is New Jersey will probably pass its own ID requirements, and then ask for another extension on the federal one,
Which
and
may
continue to pass on Real ID.
which may be even more difficult with the environment that we currently have with the current administration in terms of getting that extension.
Correct.
So Jorge, again, another complicated issues with a lot of twists and turns, and hopefully we'll see our way out of it. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion. Welcome back to Latino Motion. Once again here with Jorge Coombs, my immigration expert. And Jorge, we talked a lot, covered a lot of ground. Want to talk about the travel ban and then just a global picture in terms of immigration reform, where it stands. Let's start with the travel ban.
For the last 15 months, we've been hearing the litigation that's gone all the way up to the Supreme Court regarding Trump's latest travel ban on several predominantly Muslim countries. And what it appears at this point is the 5-4 conservative majority Supreme Court looks like it may rule affirmatively, that hasn't come out yet, but may rule affirmatively on some form of ban. And what's interesting about it is, just like the DACA litigation, they've focused a lot on what was then Mr. Trump's campaign rhetoric, and then his language and his speeches regarding the ban as president. And those words are being used against him.
That's part of the defense against to get rid of the travel ban. Let's talk about in terms of reform. Obviously, it's been an ongoing for many, many years and several attempts. Where does it stand? Do you think where we're going to meet?
Highly polarized political environment, absolutely. What I do find interesting is that the Republican Party is kind of taking a step back and letting Trump take all the hits as kind of the instigator of all the anti-immigrant agenda. However, I do believe that Republicans will see an effect in November for the midterm elections. Typically, you see turnover about 25 to 30% on incumbents. That may be enough to switch the tide in Congress, and perhaps early next year have a Congress that may rule affirmatively. Or this is what we need: we need Congress to put into place reforms or brand new laws that will allow the immigration issue to go forward.
Even if there is a majority that's willing to make those reforms, is it likely that the president's going to sign it?
Maybe, maybe not. It's interesting. I would say that the president would be on board with a DACA bill. He indicated as much when he was running. Polls show that perhaps as much as 60% of American voters would be in favor of a DACA Dreamer bill and law. But with regards to generalized immigration reform, I'm not as gung-ho about it. I just don't see it yet.
We've got about a minute left. Just want to talk about if you're in process, some sort of immigration process currently, what advice do you give?
My advice is always, pay your taxes, go to work, stay out of trouble, don't drink and drive, don't use drugs. If you have child support, make sure it's paid up. Again, immigration enforcement is at an all-time high, and they're really cracking down, but they do not have the resources to go after everyone. And individuals that are bad actors, they're focusing on them first, and any of those things that you do will assist you in perhaps adjusting in the future.
And I know some people shied away from renewals and addressing deadlines. Very critical at this juncture that you follow and make sure you refile if you have to and meet the deadlines.
Some things are changing so quickly, like DACA and TPS, that you really have to go on the websites, go to your news sources, and be as up to date as you can on those deadlines.
Perfect. Thank you, Jorge, for sharing this information with our
pleasure.
audience. And thank you for joining us once again here on Latino Motion.
Choose to get your feet wet, to learn more about protecting our environment.
Choose to read minds, to understand the human brain.
Choose to get your hands dirty, to create a masterpiece.
Stockton University offers 50 high-quality academic programs, small class sizes, and affordable tuition. Choose to match your interests and talents at one of New Jersey's nationally ranked universities.
Funding for Latino Motion is provided by Atlanticare, a member of Geisinger. Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world. And South Jersey Gas.